What's up?
Welcome.
We're missing
It's
Mr. Golden, but the show must go on, right?
yeah, it's funny. It's like, wait, who's the guy who's gonna run his mouth at the beginning of the show?
No doubt, no doubt. I hope he's
We
listening.
miss we miss you, Tim.
He's in
um,
the car, so I'm sure he is. But
yeah.
yeah, no doubt. So great episode, great guest today, Warner. Thank you for joining us. What we usually do is we go around the horn, just talk a little bit about where you're from and kind of like what your business is doing now. So I'll let you go first, and Jesse and I will go.
Yeah, sounds great. A pleasure to be here. And a shame Tim too couldn't make it, but I'm sure he'll be here in presence. My background's really tech and cybersecurity. I founded Gamma Force nearly 6 years ago to help health tech companies with cybersecurity strategy. And in my deep career helping build business to business software as a service companies and early days of the internet before that, really just saw the challenges of how to do modern cybersecurity in modern organizations and how to really position those companies in a way that their stakeholders, customers, market, really understand how they're doing security better in many ways. So
Mhm.
that's really what Gamma Force is all about. We are more a tech company really than we are a services company, and
Hmm.
act as our client security organization as if they were to hire a full-time CISO and a supporting team and get it instantly.
Yeah, nice.
I hear that all the time. Investors, right? Like if you're a SaaS company, you don't want to be a service company. You want to be a tech company. So I don't know if you're thinking about an exit someday, but we all are, right, Jesse?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have the benefit of the perspective of now having done both, and for a long time, I maybe glamorize product companies, and what I've found since then is that it's a grass is greener situation. Half the time, product companies are like, "Man, we want to service this businesses," or vice versa. I think there's a lot of value in both cases, and my mindset is as long as we're doing good work and helping people along the way, it's winning.
Yeah, awesome.
It's awesome.
Jesse, why don't you go?
Okay. Yeah, y'all know me. I'm Jesse Miller, founder of Power PSA and the Power Grid, which is a system and community where we teach MSPs how to build efficient VCISO programs. Our goal with that is to create a revolution of prosperity and quality in the VCISO industry at large. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to talking to Warner and kind of geeking out over what we would consider long in the tooth VCISO professionals, as we both are.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm Tim Schnur. The other team, Tim, that's a little quieter usually, right, Jesse? But I worked in big company security for a couple of years. Came into the channel as a GRC vendor, and I agree. Like the vendor world is being a product is not easy. It's infinite leverage, but it works both ways. So
Mm-hmm.
generating cash and trying to get a successful software company off the ground is not easy. But I'm doing a couple of things now, a little bit of VCSO work. So I'd love to hear all these recommendations from you two guys on in your experience and what you're building. I have an interesting kind of individual security, high net worth. Investors, I have it's called an investor only laptop, and I call it a vault book, which is
Hmm.
just trying to pack a lot of that big company security into a Chromebook. It's a friction. I would say it's not too frictionless of an experience, but I've got a couple senior citizens using it, and they're getting by. So I'm keeping them safe, and I'm one baby boomer at a time, and one kind of rich investor. So
Yeah.
Warren, we should catch up on that sometime. But yeah, no, we were talking in the green room, and we'd love to kind of just hear a lot about you've got 20, 25 years experience in cybersecurity. Um, you know, I guess maybe talk about even the evolution, and eventually we'll get to kind of your convictions on where things are going and where things need to go. So,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
that? Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Warner.
I'd love to hear. Yeah, we were hearing something with your audio, Tim. I don't know what cut out there, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think for me it's just interesting. I love to hear kind of the genesis story. So, I would guess, when did you know you wanted to be in cybersecurity? Like, how did that materialize?
You know, it's interesting. I don't tell this story much. Well, back in the olden days, early days of the internet, it was really just where a lot of smart folks were nerding out, and
Hmm.
I liked that. Most of internet technologies didn't have security, and the little bit that they did, it was broken.
Hmm.
For the more technical folks in the group, just for example, I remember when Linux didn't have shadow password files, so it meant the hash was
Yeah.
accessible to anyone on the servers. Right? That's just to illustrate it. So in these multi-user systems where you had an account, you could just take that password file and brute force it. It's not today rainbow tables, infinite compute, but it's still back then it was rather trivial to get access to passwords. That's when we introduced shadow password files and stuff like that. So the hashes weren't accessible, but getting pretty nerdy. The thing is, right, I have these multi-user Unix servers, and I hardened this Linux server, and I challenged the best folks I knew from a security skill perspective, attacker skills, and no one ever did manage to compromise it. I went
Hmm.
so far as to give them a local user account, and that's just to really illustrate some of the foundation of what got me into security. But admittedly, I was really passionate about tech innovation and the application of modern technologies to change the way we think and the way we do things in the world, right?
Yeah.
Distributed computing. So in a lot of ways, I was chasing where we were driving change with technology, and security was always a part of that. But I think it was maybe about 10 years ago where in my career, I kept on being pushed towards cybersecurity as a
Hmm.
primary focus. And I fought it, honestly.
That's,
And
oh
one
man.
day I'm like, why not? Why not? And I
Yeah.
went all in and never looked back.
Oh, that's awesome. It's funny. The more we talk, I feel like the more we share some background there. It was a similar thing for me. Is I'm like, no, I really like doing what I'm doing right now, like building infrastructure. But I'll tell you one thing you'll laugh about is I remember there was a we need to get a password for something, and this person wouldn't give the password out. It was an outgoing vendor who was trying to be punitive with the client, right? And so they said, well, you can pay and we'll log into the system via telnet with an outside port and set the system up. And I said, oh, via telnet. Okay, no problem. Set up a bridge between the router and the system, captured that password, and said goodbye to that IT vendor. So it's funny to think about. Those were the things we were doing prior to being in security. Just and that was more just to get things done, right? You did security as a byproduct of your job because you needed it to make sure that you had to get things done. And so, yeah, it was similar in 2014. So, just about 10 years ago is when I was tapped to build a security VCISO practice for the organization I was working in. And again, kind of went kicking and screaming, but it's interesting once you get into it. I think, as you said, somebody who has a passion for technology and a passion for changing the way that we work through technology, security is the probably one of the bleeding edges you can be on to do that, especially today. And I think that dovetails nicely into what we're talking about is using it as a business enabler. Because I think traditionally we've seen security as a zero sum game between profit and speed of the business, right? So I'd love to hear about what got you into vCISO services from security and from just regular technology? What was the kind of the tipping point when you said, "Yeah, I want to build a VCISO company"?
Yeah, I mean, none of us wake up right and like want to do security. Like Tim, the other guy who's not here, is always like he has this nickname, Doctor No, right? So if you work in a big company, you deal with these frictionless kind of like people. You're like, what's up with these guys? Like, why
Right.
are they, why are they so tough? But over time, like the risk management aspect of it, I'm sure we'll go there as well, Jesse. Like
Yeah.
that's the part of it. Like, how much is enough? How much do I need to do? Is the kind of the part of the of security that caught like that got me
Right.
into it like further, and the fact that it's like I posted something yesterday, Warner, like data doubles every 6 to 7 months. How come security budgets aren't doubling? Like, right? So it's still, I'm there's they've got to increase every year at some double digit rate. So
Yeah.
Yeah, well, on the budget increase thing, I think that's a whole value proposition discussion and a whole different discussion. Uh, well, I'll talk about what you said before, Jesse, from two angles. One, a personal perspective, and two, the business side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And more from a personal perspective, I've been interested in a higher level work for a while. There was a certain point after relearning the many gyrations and evolutions of the technologies we use, I got tired of relearning the same things with a slightly different angle on it. It was less novel to me.
Mm.
And when I was observing where there was an opportunity to be more strategic, I was seeing security getting elevated in the organization. Whereas even in tech companies, technical team members are sometimes looked at as a more tactical function. And I'd advocate and say that's a mistake, especially in a technology organization. And that's less common in technology organizations, in part why I focused there. But security had a lot of opportunity to help drive the organizational strategy, and that
Right.
was attractive to me. And then on the business side, well, having helped build a few B2B SaaS companies across different industries, fintech, health tech, insurtech, after the insurtech play helped a company get from concept to growth mode, I was considering what was next. And
Mm.
my thing was I didn't want to create another Me Too product in a crowded market with a muted
Yeah.
value proposition. So I'm like, okay, what can I do that's higher value? And I was looking to focus more in pure cybersecurity or pure technology at the time. And well, that was the predilection to Gamma Force, and we're here now 6 years later.
That's awesome.
yeah. And Warner, I was reading deeper on your profile, and I love you're involved heavily in, I guess, the Ohio, call it like tech ecosystem, right? Like incubating and helping out some like young founders, telling them about some of your successes and failures. Um, I'd love to hear kind of, it said Gamma Force, and I forget what it's called, the name of your like accelerator or kind of like tech group in there. But how did you mentioned then in your profile, like you guys work together, or how just I guess what's the connection there?
Well, I really think of my life, professional life, as three different pillars. The first is the for-profit pillar, Gamma Force, and then there's the pay it forward pillar, which is more supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem, collaborating with VC, helping out in accelerators, mentoring and advising entrepreneurs. That's just work I'm passionate about and think it's important. And then the third is the nonprofit pillar. I founded a 501c3 nonprofit tech community. coalition some years back. And our mission is to enable the tech and startup communities through charity and education. And we do that through fiscal sponsorship, as well as supporting the 50 plus active tech and startup community groups here in the Columbus region. And that realizes through a couple activities that we do to cross pollinate the community. We do
Mm.
an annual tech community holiday party where all the groups come together, hang out, and learn from each other. And then we have an annual tech community summer fest where we throw a party for the city, live music, food
Mm.
trucks, build awareness of all the things we're doing. And that's coming up on August 10th.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I love the whole community building aspect, and I think that people like yourself that are fostering those initiatives and kind of being intentional about doing that are leading the way for I think the next generation of the way that we see that business is done. So that's really cool. When you were talking, one thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm sure that many of our audience is thinking, is could you put your finger on or talk about why you think that Gamma Force has been so successful and been able to succeed as a VCISO practice? Going on, you said you're in year 7 now. You've been 6 years. That's early, right, for as VCISOs go. So I'd love to hear maybe your take on why you think it's been so successful for you up to this point.
Yeah, I think that it really just ties into focusing on creating value for our
Mm,
clients
mm,
and all stakeholders, our team as well.
right.
If the team doesn't win, the clients don't win. It's all complementary, a flywheel of sorts.
Yeah.
And that's pretty abstract, right? But we actually do security strategy work. We're not just running down a framework arbitrarily
Right.
and um, telling our clients what to do just because we're putting the executive hat on and helping
Yeah.
them as a peer, but with the deep expertise in the cybersecurity
Mm,
profession. And
yeah.
we operate and think like I would joining a company as a full time CISO.
Mm, mm.
How does
Yeah.
that
I
how does
love
that
that.
start, Warner? Like that kind of that first interaction. Is there usually some kind of catalyst that they call you, or I guess what's your first question usually meeting a new executive of a medium sized business?
Well, why? Often they have some initial thoughts themselves,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Yeah,
understand what their thoughts are, and then build on that.
I love
What
it.
are they trying to achieve in the business? Are they
Yeah.
trying to scale it? Are they trying to get it to a point and flip it? What's their market? Uh,
Mm,
are they B2B? Are they healthcare? Are they fintech, financial, whatever? What are the business drivers for doing that? And what are they doing in their organizations and business, be a product that align to that? Are there
mm,
things we can do differently to reduce risk or to reduce unnecessary expense, right? Because if we're health tech and we don't have protected health information, do we really need to be HIPAA compliant? I'd
mm.
say hard no, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
where's that line for investment, if at all? I think as security professionals, we are often like to be arbitrary. It's like, oh, this scan says you have 5 critical vulnerabilities and 2 high. Fix it. I don't care. It's my marketing site. Leave me
Right.
alone.
Right. Yeah.
good stuff.
It's that's I had my own thoughts on this, and some things you said kind of perked my ears up, and why I wanted to ask this question is you were talking about what do I want to do next. Do I want to be have a muted value prop and be in a crowded market, and what's my total addressable market, and thinking about all those things and what you just expounded on, sitting down with the executive and saying, well, why am I here? Why did you take this meeting, and letting them tell you why and what their expectations are from this conversation, what they want to get out of it. It's a good way to break the ice too, and get people smiling a little bit. So I think you're dead on there. Is what are the goals for the program, and how can I not for the program, what are the goals for the business, and where does security fit into that, and how does it enable that? So I appreciate that you kind of going a little level deeper on that, and I think I'd love to hear more MSPs start talking to their clients that way, whether it's about security or not, right? And having those types of conversations. Of course, it does mean, you've had kind of a in the trenches education, right? Building these SaaS companies on that kind of value prop and having to build that. So, it may take some learning, and it forces us to get out of our comfort zone, I think. And whether it's, taking a couple classes, reading some books, and understanding how to improve our business and then applying that to our clients, I think is super powerful. So, yeah, I appreciate you talking about that.
The I guess the next step, right? Like really setting expectations with the client.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, how do you set kind of the ground rules in terms of like roles and responsibilities and kind of, it's a team sport, right? I mean, how do you, with that all, how do you get them to kind of embrace it, empower you, empower, certain people on the team to, do things or, right, get to kind of like the roadmap that you're setting pretty early?
Mm-hmm.
Short answer is it depends, right? Every organization is different. The team composition, the team experience, the needs. The big thing though is that we're working together collaboratively, and most frequently, the person in the organization who's responsible for cybersecurity doesn't need to be, and they have many other responsibilities, so we can take that off their plate. But a key thing is we're not hyper tactical, right? We don't do support, we don't manage their technology, and we don't want to. Now we can help them build capabilities, and if they have uh, skill gaps for good reason, right? It doesn't make sense to hire a full-time security engineer. In many cases, not. Well, we can help put that stuff in place, but we're not going to be doing all their day-to-day maintenance activities. And
Mm.
the really most important part, though, is for us to work collaboratively as a team. Now, from that point, it's always a negotiation, not a negotiation in the maybe traditional context, fight until someone wins with an upper hand, more just a shared understanding about who's doing what and why.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
so I guess what I was getting at is looking at the clients that you thought were really successful, right? Like they basically picked up what you were dropping and ran with it, versus the ones that are kind of like, oh yeah, like, and this would probably fall in that regulatory camp, like this regulator is like knocking on our door, you know, fix it, and you feel like you're kind of like trying to attack the problem at different angles, but they're, as you said, like you're giving recommendations, like you're not necessarily getting on the ground level and implementing. So,
We do implement, we
oh, okay,
just don't do support. And
yeah. So I mean,
we're,
are there things that kind of like you found are, like I said, that they just kind of grasp really quickly, and um, you're able to kind of be the catalyst for change pretty quickly?
well, some of these things are, well, the foundation behind it is, are they a good fit? If they don't want to prioritize the things we're talking about, there's probably a good reason for that. And
Yeah.
usually I spend the time to identify that up front. If there are not business justifications for the work we're doing, it's not unusual for me to suggest they limit their investment in cybersecurity at that time, until the circumstance changes. So I don't want to
Mm.
work with or sell people things that they don't need and that don't add value in their organizations. So
Yeah.
assume those things are aligned, because if we're working with them, they are. And then
Yeah.
from that point forward, it's really just how do we build these capabilities in the organization so they're sustainable, aligned to what the team and organization is capable of
Mm.
now, and we help
Yeah.
with the other stuff, or figure out a way to do it right. And maybe they do need a MSSP, and we can find someone to help with that.
Yeah.
And that's true of any other category. But on the higher level security program side, I think having control owners is important. So building that capability in the organization, as opposed to a security silo of a service provider, or even an in-house security leader, where they leave and the program falls apart. That's not
Right.
building a security program. That's just doing a job, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
build the security program in the organization through control owners. And I have different illustrations like that on the engineering side. So it's not about uh, uh, I'm forgetting the jargon, support standards, or
Yeah.
the it's not about that. It's just about understanding where we add the most value, where
Right.
their team can come in, and maybe we need to help build a process so they can support it. Or we often do work with ITMSPs. We don't Many of our clients already have them, because if they're at a certain scale, they
Right.
have that tactical need, and we'll work with the MSPs to take care of some of those things. So it really just depends, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. One thing I wanted to dig into here, and I got a couple of thoughts swimming around, so we're just going to start with this one, is when you set out to build Gamma Forest and do the VCISO services, was it the intention day one to have this architecture implementation team, or did that kind of materialize based on need from your clients? And you're like, hey, we'd rather have some control over the way these things are getting implemented, or was it a combination of both? I'm interested to hear about the strategy and kind of the development of that piece of the business.
Yeah. I think the philosophy behind the business has been fairly consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission of changing cybersecurity to be more strategic and drive meaningful value, that's
Mm-hmm.
been true the whole time. Uh, and we are intentional about how we do that.
Mm.
There are many things we could have done along the way that would have been new business, right?
Right. Right.
We could do support,
Mm.
but we choose not to. We're
Yeah.
not a SOC, don't want to be a SOC.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the the thing is, I think it's so important to listen to the market, listen to the customer.
Yeah.
And if our customers didn't have that need, we
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be doing it.
Right.
Now, it just so happens it's aligned to what we want to do, our
Yeah.
mission.
Yeah.
And I like hanging out with really smart folks.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have engineers on the team.
Yeah.
So that's part of it too. But if those
Mm-hmm.
things weren't aligned, we wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's, and I think that's, to me, it sounds like, a couple of things stick out is number one, you're still having fun in your business, right? You're saying, I want to be around smart people. I want to talk smart stuff and we're going to provide value for our customers. So this is all aligned. Why wouldn't we do this? Right. And listening to, both the head and the heart a little bit there, which I love that. And I think that's how you keep things fresh. Right. And then secondly, walking away from bad business. I mean, come on, that's great. How many times do we feel like we just want to take this deal because it's money, but and we know it's a bad idea, right? But getting disciplined about an ICP, I think, is important there as well. And so you touched on that. So interestingly enough, that leads me to what I wanted to ask. Do you guys focus on like SaaS companies because of your background there, or do you find that you've found other clients that are good fits for you and have that kind of teamwork approach to the program?
That's correct. We really lean into health tech, and that's our
Okay.
core market. And We do work in tech too, because it's a fit for
Yeah.
what we can do, and we're not
Hmm.
going to turn it away if it's a fit. But
Sure.
health tech is where we're focusing.
Yeah. Yeah, I see the same thing similarly in those organizations. Is there's a blend of innovation that's happening as well as regulatory burden, and so they're not being pushed along by the regulation. They're trying to stay ahead of it in most of those organizations. So I think that's a good environment to be in. You know,
Most of them don't, right? Warren, like you said, HIPAA, maybe they're not holding customer data or not like
right, right.
custodian of it. Maybe they're chasing like a sock too, just because they're like a health tech. I don't know, but
Yeah. Well, we
um,
look at the Change Healthcare breach that just happened, right? That would be one where that had probably affected a lot of those health tech companies, but it's a different kind of environment there. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Folks in the field like to poke at smaller businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my more controversial take is smaller businesses are more secure
Mm,
than the big companies poking fun at them, right?
right.
I've not encountered a healthcare industry company that was really good at security if we take a holistic view.
Yeah.
And for good reason. HIP is privacy focused, right?
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't have a bunch of security requirements built in.
Yeah.
Uh, but healthcare is really good at privacy. In fact, the
Mm,
best I've seen across companies because they have to be by law, right?
yeah.
Um, but the
Yeah.
thing is, modern companies can be exceptional at security because they're not trying to move past decades of legacy craft, right? Doing
Mm-hmm.
the right thing
Yeah.
from the start is easier. And modern
Right.
capabilities and practices tend to be more secure by default. Automated
Yeah.
code deployment through a production pipeline with security inflection points along the way. The only way to change production. I'll tell you what is way more secure than the 20-page paper that needed a signature that I knew of companies doing many years ago. I'm
Yeah.
sure there are still companies out there that do that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Sad to say, I've not seen it. I hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah.
Yeah. Funny. Yeah. It's interesting.
You
You
do a
know,
lot
I'm
of
thinking.
like you're doing a lot of you're working with dev teams and SecOps and DevSecOps, right? Like in terms of you know branching and all Git repositories and there's a secured by design and right like and I'm not sure if it's you probably have a mix of cloud native and open source, but I think that's as you said like they're on top of their game compared to United Healthcare. Name your HMO, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You know, just thinking about you know, as the first MSP that I built that VCISO program for 10 years ago, thinking about our kind of trajectory there. And you're in this weird spot where you have all these legacy clients, you haven't been doing this, and you're trying to bring them along, but half of them are not that good fit, like you said, Warner, where they don't want to do security or they want to just do the bare minimum to meet regulatory requirements, right? So, I mean, I've had clients. I think MSPs need to get these things in place at a bare minimum to risk assess their clients and protect themselves, right? Obviously, their contracts should, but you know, taking a risk assessment and actually showing a client, here's all your gaps, here's where we think you need to improve, and customize to you, right? You said based on your business and what's important to you, here's what we think you need to do, and then letting them make a decision. So I think, you know, obviously new business, you want to focus on clients that are aligned, but then I think current business and legacy clients, it's like, well, we've shown you the risks and you can choose what you want to do with those risks. And you might not do the things that we think are the right things to do, but at the end of the day, we have to say our job is to present the risk to the business and let the business make the decisions and then document that and be ready to pick up the pieces when and if it does fall apart, right? So, did you, I mean, obviously you were building net new, but how do you handle that where you get into a situation where you feel that there is, you know, maybe negligence being done on the part of the client and you have to accept that, right? How does that, do you, you know, I think as technical people at heart, we really want to do the right thing and we like logic. So it's logically the right thing to do. So why aren't you doing it? Right. So how do you politically combat that in an organization? What are some techniques people can use?
Are we talking more the MSP angle or maybe internal security organization? Or give me more
Yeah.
context.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking for when you're in a client, in a VCISO engagement or in a risk engagement, and you have a list of recommendations that they need to do, but the leadership team is either wantonly ignoring it or just doesn't have time or is not invested. What are some ways that you get people to get invested as part of that?
It's funny to think. I just have so few situations where that's
Yeah,
the case.
it
And
seems like
I,
he's nailing his ICP, Jesse.
I yeah,
Right?
I
So
get
it's like
it.
I kind
yeah.
of,
I've been
I
there.
getting exactly what I wanted. Yeah. Go ahead, Warren.
But
Well then,
if we're being hired and paid to
yeah.
help with these things,
Mm-hmm.
and the things we're saying aren't connecting, I'm wondering where the disconnect is there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If we're trying to solve a problem our client doesn't want solved, what are we doing? And
Mm.
there might be more of a philosophical issue there. But I'll play the game and
All
say,
right.
like, if we're in that space, if I think a really good example is maybe badge management, right?
Yeah.
I say the average MSP, we're probably responsible for patch management,
Mm-hmm.
and if we are not able to do our jobs, we have to be vocal about that. And
Yeah.
the implications of patch management is your computers might be broken into. You might have a ransomware attack, or maybe accessing a website on the internet will allow somebody to get into the data on your computer. So
Mm-hmm.
having that conversation. Well, maybe that workstation doesn't have any data we care about, right? Sure, steal it. Sure, lock it down. There's limited business impact.
Right.
Then fine,
Right.
who cares? Uh, but maybe we want to patch it eventually. So why don't they want to patch?
Right.
And let's talk about that and let's solve that problem. If they don't want to patch at all, well, again, I ask the question, why are we here?
Yeah.
Or if we have a reason to be there, but they don't want to patch, well, maybe we need to revisit the delineation of responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a certain point where duty of care comes into play. If I'm a
Yeah.
CISO in an organization and I don't feel like the shared accountability and the executive team is aligned to our duty of care, and I have a little more responsibility because the security title, well, that's a career decision point. Do
Yeah.
I want to hang out for a couple years knowing
Yeah.
that as an officer in the company, I can't execute my duty of care? I probably wouldn't. Well, that's a privileged position, but if we are in an executive role,
Yeah.
that is part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I think you said something I was hoping you would touch on is kind of uh, the ability to call things out for what they are and be resolute yet amicable in the way we're doing that, and be okay with the decision and be okay then walking away, right? So that you have to have all of those things be true and be willing to cut the cord on a bad client or a bad job to make sure that you're staying ethical in what you're doing. So I love that you said that.
The
Like you
thing
said,
is, if
go
we have a
ahead.
bunch of ego in the game, right, with our
Right.
client, like,
Right.
what are we doing?
Yeah.
Go patch your
Yes.
computer.
Right. Right. Well, that's what I was getting at, right? Is I think sometimes ego does play a part in us getting frustrated about it. And I'm speaking as a recovering, as a recovering egomaniac, sophomoric hotshot, right? When I was a super technical guy, right? I had to relearn throughout the course of my career how you really get things done. And I had somebody say something to me one time that was just, it sticks with me as long, it's been sticking with me my whole career. And he said, if you really want to win, you got to redefine what winning looks like, right?
Mm,
And that was poignant because winning doesn't look like getting your way. Winning looks like moving people along and making them better, right? And so how do we move our client along and make it better? We remove ego from the decision, and we say again, here's the risk, here's what we think you should do. You have to make a decision and then be okay with that decision and say, okay, we're going to live to fight another day and we'll talk about this next week, right? And one thing I will say is that I think documenting that is powerful. And I think that's where I've seen in this kind of limbo of trying to bring clients that maybe weren't concerned about security along and do the right thing is in a program documenting things and people knowing that it's going to go down on paper that they made that decision of no is actually psychologically an incentive to do the right thing, right? So if you say, okay, I'm not going to do all this stuff, I don't care, and it's going to be documented, well, when the breach happens, it's on your plate, right? And so it goes back to what you're talking about, the executives being responsible. Whatever you may think about SolarWinds, whether he did or he didn't misrepresent the security posture, right? We don't want to be in that situation ever. And so I think it's important to stick to your guns in a right way and in an empathetic way to make those kinds of conversations happen. Right.
Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like the.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Tim. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love where this is going because you're talking about this. You talked about due care, and you're starting to see like regulatory entities like the SEC like kind of charge the CISO. But at some point, like, are you an internal CISO? Are you an external one? Does it matter? Is there legalese, right? Like, as you said, Jesse, some of it's documented. So I guess where do all these pieces fall? And at what point, Warner, are you kind of have to pick up and say, like, I resign, right? Like, I'm not taking that kind of responsibility, or I'm not being compensated for the risk, probably. So I don't know, you know.
Well, I love this topic. I'm glad it came up. Security is an organizational responsibility, not in the generic
Right.
awareness program sense. The most senior executive team is accountable for duty of care. The team as a whole, the officers in the company, are responsible for duty of care. As say it's a CIO or CISO, I don't care what the title is. If a single executive allows themselves to assume full accountability through the way the organization is operating, that's a complete miss. The CFO shouldn't be responsible individually for security. The security person shouldn't be, CISO shouldn't be individually responsible for finance. But the team as a whole is accountable for both of those things.
Yeah.
It's the bottom line. So now there's some nuance there legally and so on, but that's how I treat security governance in the organizations I work with. So if I'm a CISO, that's how I think of it. Now there's some debates here and there and some different angles on it, but that's my take, and I think it has legs. And then secondly, externally, right? I and we have executive level security experience. I've personally built over 7 security and/or privacy programs. I've been a chief security officer, and so it's not just me tagging VCISO on my name, right? So that's part of the qualification. If a client wants to hire us because they're trying to transfer risk, we cannot be accountable for their security program in
Right.
that sense. We
Right.
can share responsibility for it. The officers in their organization are accountable for security. Now, we're
That's
not
right.
going to have them sign paperwork and debate back and forth. And sometimes there's a period of time in which the executive team has to be educated. I've had protracted conversations with founders of companies where they're like, really? Am I? Why should I
Yeah.
care about this?
Yeah.
They're the officer in the company. So at no point would I want our clients to think that we are serving as the focal point for their duty of care. But we
Right.
will work with them to get the right
Yeah.
governance in place and share responsibility as a CISO, but
Yeah.
we're not going to be accountable in that sense.
I think that's, I mean, this is an important conversation right now because yeah, at the end of the day, and
Everything,
I've
right,
gone,
Jesse? I mean, it's like
I've gone,
liability, and we've had lawyers on the show, kind of talking
well,
about what's your MSA, and right, like So keep
Yeah,
going,
having
Jesse.
having having hallway conversations with other CISOs who have served in large capacities in organizations, not to name names, but they're like, number one, for for an organization to really think that the SEC is going to allow them to name a VCISO as their security officer, hold them some sort of responsibility, it's literally
Right.
not going to happen. So companies doing that, it's not going to hold up. Number one, but
They
again,
shouldn't
it's
be.
a no, they shouldn't be. But I mean, I've had people ask, right? So it's like, no, you can't. That's like I serve. Where I was getting to is this role serves in an advisory capacity. Think of it as like a consigliere, right? Like I'm serving you as your advisor to make the right security decisions, and I'm providing you with clear and concise data on the ramifications of those decisions. But then it's the organization's job and the executive team's job to take that data, look at the business risk, and make a decision based on it. And that's where the responsibility, the demarcation of it is. And so I think this is important to have these conversations as you talk to clients and as this service grows in demand, because there's going to be on both sides miseducation, right? You're going to have clients who aren't educated and be like, this standard said we need to have someone responsible for security, so we're going to hire that out. Well, no, that's
Mhm.
that's not how it works, right?
You want to
You
transfer risk? I know a bunch of insurance carriers. Let's talk to them.
that's right. But yeah, I mean, those are the types of conceptions, and it goes back to what you said, talking about the why. Like, why am I here? Oh, we need to transfer risk. We need somebody responsible for security. Well, I can't help you with that. What I can help you do is become more resilient, and help you use it in your business, help you use it as a differentiator, help you go after new business, help you do all these value adds to your organization with security, oh, while being more resilient. But at the end of the day, you own the risk, and that's not transferable by hiring a consultant, right? So I think this is an important conversation to have with clients, and as you mentioned, start talking about that why and flesh these things out ahead of time.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of the misconceptions are from enterprise, Jesse, in terms of CISOs being scapegoats, right? Like for these breaches, like, oh, the CISO was fired. And it's like, well,
Well, we let ourselves be scapegoats.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
I I've heard murmurs of companies hiring multiple VCSOs and security companies to try and somehow access their security and cyber insurance coverage. So, oh, we can get more cyber insurance coverage by hiring this guy. He's got 5 million. Hiring that guy. He's got 3 million. Hiring this girl. She's got 5 million.
wow.
Um, but that's again not going to hold up. But it's somehow like we're just all singing kumbaya and convincing ourselves it's going to be all right. Like obviously that's not the organization you want to work in. But I've heard of these kinds of harebrained strategies, right? So it's just
Yeah.
interesting to think about. And again, it goes back to education and being upfront with what you're getting and not getting, and being okay if we don't get a sale because the client is has some misconceptions. So
Is that 4 to 6 figure annual contract value worth a 7 or 8 figure lawsuit?
right.
I'd suggest not.
I would say, yeah, I would think those numbers don't add up, right? But it's funny.
I mean, the SEC's behavior, like suing a like security operations guy, like what was the guy's compensation relative to the CEO,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. That whole thing is a debacle. I honestly don't touch. I don't have an opinion on that
Well,
because there's, yeah,
Dodd Frank and whatever, like, back in 2009, right? They switched, so the CEOs have to sign every accounting financial statements, right?
right,
I don't know why
right.
they let them off the hook here. So
Yeah,
the
well,
security charter should
CEO
be signed by the
ultimately,
CEO, right?
yeah,
CEOs ultimately accountable, right?
Yeah,
But I'd suggest a well organized and governed organization that accountability is shared. But
yeah,
CEO can't be like, oh crap, not my fault.
yeah.
It's not a luxury of the
yeah.
position. Sorry.
I don't. I don't know cyber, so this is not my fault. Well, you're supposed to at some point. All right,
Jesse,
so
and you must advise. I mean, you must have a playbook here, right? Because like your clients are channel, right? Most of them are MSPs, and
yeah.
they're playing kind of man in the middle a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's some ways to get the organization integrated, and obviously, right, I'm not going to plug myself, but this is what we teach MSPs to do, is create some of that education and build that into our processes. I think it's what I talk about is that connective tissue, right? Is all the way from marketing to sales to implementation to service delivery and then to account management. That should all have a story for the customer, and it should all be connected, right? I think I see a lot of organizations that are siloed. So I'll get off my high horse about that. But what I mean by that is that when you come into a client, the sales process should have talked about what Warner was talking about, right? And saying we're the advisor, right? Then when that gets handed off, the implementation should pick that up and say, okay, we're the advisor. We need to do these 5 things. We need to talk to your executives. We need to understand what systems support revenue. And that's how we're driving what security you should have, not the CIS said you need malware protection, right? Like what systems support revenue and how exposed are those? That's what we should be digging into. And again, systems to do that on a repeatable way so that you can have GRC analysts doing data gathering, have your higher paid VCISOs doing the analysis and the customer interaction on that, right? You build a whole process around that to be able to deliver it repeatably, where you're having those executive level arbiters, so to speak, Warner, right? Interpreting that data and then delivering it to the customer and helping them make decisions. So I think by doing that, you get through the implementation and have the organization very aligned. Right now, you have a playbook. You're executing that. Okay, things adjust, things change. We're meeting with the executive team. We're helping them build that governance process. We're encouraging the audit committee, right, to actually talk about cyber risk in the board meeting to meet and starting to move that up and down through the lines in the organization. And then on the back end with account management, it's the virtuous circle. Like, can we help the client with some architecture stuff? We see they need a push, right? It's not selling them, it's creating our skills and our abilities to help the client out for the things that they need to do. And so, that is a holistic system, I think, is the way that you can really facilitate having the client involved and being aligned with them from a business value add perspective. And that's how I see it.
with a good MSA.
With a good MS, yes, with some good contracts stating all of that on the back end. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, contracts are important, right? Everyone should operate professionally, but I will push back a little on the context of signing off and this. I don't like internal contracts in companies. It silos and creates friction. Say we have a large scale company where we have internal billing and contracts for internal services. That's an illustration of it. So I think if we have gotten so far, and I don't care if it's an internal security organization or a service provider, where every tactical thing we talk about has to have more formal sign off, we should probably be considering the health of the relationship or the fit of the relationship.
Yeah.
Because that's not a great way to work, and it's going to reduce the value we bring to the table.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. And I'm not saying that like, hey, you got to sign this waiver that you didn't accept our recommendations. I mean, I've seen MSPs that do that and those that don't. We decided not to do that when we were building our program. It was more of yes, you have a contract that protects you, but it's more of a gentleman's, not a gentleman's agreement, but in that what I meant by putting it down on paper is just it forces someone to confront their decision. They can't just hand wave it away, right? So, you're saying, hey, we had minutes for this meeting and we made these decisions. Like, these are the decisions that were made, right? And it's not to like say, haha, I got you. It's just more to say people actually forced to a decision. And, maybe you have seen this probably in your previous journeys within organizations is, sometimes executives want to kind of keep it a little bit murky so they don't really have to make that decision. And when you can pin that decision down, typically the right decision gets made. So that is what I was referring to with that. Yeah,
makes sense. And not picking on you, just clarifying context. I in some of my CISO circles, more than once, I've heard of people printing out a 1 or 2 pager and putting it in front of a peer to sign, and it's like, okay, let's step back and reset.
We've just created an adversarial relationship now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was really just referring to like getting away from that. Like, you're not going to transfer risk here, just in the channel, like because Jesse's dealing with MSP to third parties, SMB. So we only have a couple minutes left. What we usually do is just closing thoughts. I would also ask, I think we've heard a lot of closing thoughts, but kind of where you think things are going, and I always like to ask, like, what's your one unorthodox opinion of like cybersecurity or something like that. So.
All right, I'll go first. That's fine.
All right.
Unorthodox. I'll go unorthodox first because I get crucified on this for social media constantly. So I'll say every MSP should have a VCISO program. And that doesn't mean you should just call somebody a VCISO and deliver it. It means you should educate, upskill, and get with this new wave of risk management that we need to start delivering to our clients. So maybe it's not that unorthodox after all. My takeaway is, ICP is king in a lot of ways. I mean, I love that one of things Warner said is he's been super successful because he makes sure the client's a right fit. Do we know what's a right fit client for us? Have we identified that? And are we actively eliminating that in our meetings and discovery and marketing process, right? So that's my takeaway. I've been really love this conversation, Warner, and appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Warner, you're up. Go ahead.
I'll take them both in one narrative, unorthodox and where I see us going. I think we have unusual opportunity right now as security leaders. And many organizations, the CISO has been elevated and not buried a couple levels down in the reporting structure. So up here in the executive team, boards are taking more interest. I think many of us are still very tactical and technical. And if we're just screaming about the things that are trying to get us and not taking the time to understand our businesses and how we can not only enable the business as a member of the team, but do so in a way with our unique expertise in cybersecurity, we're missing the table. I see too many obstructionists security organizations still where they are slowing down the business in ways that go so far as to destroy value. I worry that if we don't change that quickly enough, we will lose that seat at the table. We used to complain about not having the seat. Now we have the seat, but we need to act strategically as a member of the executive team to keep it. And if we're not operating that way, we probably shouldn't be there in the first place. So it's a challenge for all of us in the field. I think we have opportunities to elevate the value we're adding as cybersecurity professionals, but I know we can do it.
Yeah. So
awesome.
I'll kind of follow that narrative too, Warner. I think the board, as you said, like, are cybersecurity or at least an IT person getting representation on most kind of executive boards at the Fortune 500? I think the answer is till now, no. And I think that'll change quickly in the next like year, 2, 3 years, where there'll be significant representation when call it digitalization of businesses is, it's incredible how much you're relying on IT, and now you're going to rely on cybersecurity. So I don't know. Are they going to take the accountant's seat? Are they going to take the lawyer's seat? You're right. Like, you kind of have like an accountant, a lawyer, like the 80-year-old former CEO of like a, whatever. Right. So I think that board composition is going to change dramatically. I think cybersecurity focus will change dramatically. As you said, there's been a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misunderstandings of kind of what it is and why you need it. But as people kind of grasp and take stock of how much of their business is technology or digital, I think they'll come around. So awesome. Well, that's about it. We're going to give a minute back here. Thanks for joining, everyone. And Warner, awesome insights, and I really appreciate it. You as well, Jesse, the Dr. VCISO himself. So next week is an interesting topic. We're gonna do a little role play, and you've been on Robert Gillette before, Jesse. So we're gonna role play selling to a small business. We got some good insights, and some of my questions were kind of a little leading to Warner just to get a little homework for next week. So, yeah, enjoy the weekend, and we're out of here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, audience. Take care.
Take care.
Absolutely. Here we go.
Subscribe now.